It was just another quiet evening at Miller's diner, until a scream shattered the air. Everyone turned. Two teenage boys were standing beside a booth, their faces twisted in arrogance, and in front of them sat a young girl, barely 17, her cheek red from a slap she hadn't deserved. Her tray had fallen to the floor, her milkshake spilled across her shoes, and the entire diner went silent. But what no one in that room knew was this. That girl's father wasn't just an ordinary man. He was the one person in this city no one dared to cross. The man who could make entire empires vanish overnight. The quiet girl was Isabella Romano, and her father was Antonio Romano, head of the most feared and respected Mafia family in the country. But that night, in that small-town diner, Isabella didn't want anyone to know who she was. She just wanted to be treated like a normal person, until they crossed a line they would regret for the rest of their lives. Isabella had always preferred simple places, old bookstores, small diners, the kind where people smiled when they served you coffee. She'd grown up surrounded by luxury, mansions, bodyguards, expensive cars, but none of that ever made her feel free. The Romano name carried both power and fear, and sometimes she wished she could escape it, just to know what life was like for ordinary people. That's why she came to Miller's diner that evening. She wore plain jeans, a soft gray hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. No guards, no drivers, just Isabella alone, enjoying the smell of coffee and freshly baked pie. She sat by the window, watching the rain blur the neon lights outside. The bell above the diner door jingled, and two boys walked in, loud laughing, the kind that loved attention. Jason and Kyle, high school seniors, football players, and self-proclaimed kings of their small town. Everyone knew them, and everyone stayed out of their way. They spotted Isabella sitting alone, quietly reading a book. Jason elbowed Kyle and grinned. "New girl," he whispered. Kyle smirked. "Looks like she doesn't know who runs this place." They strutted over to her booth like they owned the diner. "Hey, sweetheart," Jason said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You new around here?" Isabella looked up calmly. "Just visiting." "Visiting, huh?" Kyle said, leaning close. "You got a name?" She smiled politely. "Isabella," Jason repeated, pretending to savor it. "Pretty name, but you look too fancy for this dump. What are you doing here?" "I like quiet places," she replied softly, trying to stay polite. Jason chuckled. "Quiet, huh? Maybe you're too quiet." He leaned forward. "You know, girls like you shouldn't sit alone. Makes people think you're weird." She looked back down at her book. "Please, just let me read." But Jason wasn't the kind who took no for an answer. He reached over, snatched the book from her hands, and tossed it on the floor. The sound of pages tearing made her flinch. "Oops," he said mockingly. "Guess you'll have to talk to us now." Everyone in the diner turned. The waitress froze behind the counter. The manager whispered something to the cook, but no one dared to intervene. Jason and Kyle were trouble, and their fathers were big names in town politics. Isabella stood slowly, her voice trembling but steady. "Pick it up," Jason laughed. "What was that?" "I said," she repeated. "Pick it up." Kyle grinned, moving closer. "Or what? You gonna make us?" And before anyone could react, Jason's hand flashed. A sharp sound cut through the diner. He had slapped her. The room went deathly silent. Isabella's cheek burned, her eyes watered, but not from pain, it was humiliation. Jason sneered. "Next time, watch your tone." He turned away laughing. The diner manager started to say something, but stopped when Isabella finally spoke. In a calm, almost whispering voice, she said, "You shouldn't have done that." Jason stopped mid-step and turned. "What'd you say?" She met his eyes. "You shouldn't have done that. You don't know who you're dealing with." He laughed again. "Oh yeah? What, your daddy a cop or something?" She looked down, wiping the corner of her mouth, then simply said, "Something like that." And then she left. The boys laughed behind her as she walked out into the rain, the diner door closing quietly behind her. But when the door shut, Jason noticed something on the floor. A silver pendant had slipped from her hoodie pocket. He picked it up, smirking. It had an engraved crest, a lion with a crown and two initials AR. Jason didn't know it yet, but that small pendant would turn his world upside down. Later that night, Isabella sat in her room on the top floor of the Romano estate. The mansion overlooked the entire city, lights sparkling below like distant stars. Her father, Antonio Romano, sat across from her, silent, his dark eyes unreadable. He was a man of quiet authority, sharp suit, salt and pepper hair, voice calm but heavy with power. People said he could make the mayor apologize with a single phone call. Antonio listened carefully as Isabella told him everything. The diner, the boys, the slap. She didn't cry. She just stared out the window, her fingers tracing the bruise on her cheek. Her father finally spoke. "You didn't want protection, Bella. You wanted to be ordinary. But the world doesn't always let kind people walk free." "I don't want revenge, Papa," she said softly. "I just want them to understand what they did." Antonio nodded slowly. "And they will." The next morning, Miller's diner was filled again, but this time something was different.